Welcome back to the Brothers War EDH. I'm back. It's your boy C Daddy.
No.
Joined with our daddy.
No,
Or
just Ryan.
our son.
Just Ryan.
Yeah, today we have an EDH gameplay video for you guys. It's good to be back. Just a couple things before we get started. One, yes, our Discord is still alive. We had 0 joiners, so please join the Discord, interact with us. We love to talk to you guys. We're here for you as a resource. So yeah, just continue to show us some love by liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing, do what you got to do to support your boys. And yeah, so we can continue to bring you content that we all love and enjoy, so yeah, this is our Phyrexia I'll Be One gameplay video. It's a spicy one.
It is very spicy.
It gets intense at times. So yeah, let us know what you think about it. Yeah, and with that, we're just gonna get right into the opening hands.
First, we have Chris on Elesh Norn, Mother of Machines. This is a dedicated Stax list that wants to Stax out the board while also getting value off of Elesh Norn through ETB effects to eventually combo out and win the game. Next, we have Henry on Unctus, Grand Metatech. This is a turbo deck that wants to use untapped effects to gain infinite mana and use Unctus as an outlet to loot through the deck to combo out for the win. Next, we have Shawn on Ixhel, Sign of Atraxa. This is a mid-range deck that wants to use Ixhel to gain card advantage while deploying big threats to eventually swing out and win the game. And last, we have Ryan on Slobad Iron Goblin. This deck seeks to assemble a combo through artifacts or through the graveyard to win the game. And with that, let's go to war. Ryan has a pregame action. He puts Gemstone Caverns onto the battlefield, exiling an unexpected windfall. Chris begins with the Plains. He casts a Jeweled Lotus. He taps his Plains and casts a Mana Vault. He passes the turn to Henry. Henry draws for turn and casts a Paradise Mantle. He then plays a Misty Rainforest and passes to Shawn. Shawn draws for turn and plays a Bayou. He taps his Bayou to cast a Sylvan Safekeeper. He then passes to Ryan. Ryan draws and plays a Mountain. He taps his Gemstone Caverns to cast a Sensei's Divining Top. He taps his Mountain to Activating Top and looks at the top 3 cards of his library, putting them back in any order. He then passes to Chris. Chris draws and plays a Scavenger Grounds. He taps his Mana Vault, floating 3 colorless mana, then sacks his Jeweled Lotus to cast Elesh Norn, Mother of Machines. He then uses the last floating mana and taps out for a Glow Rider. He then passes his turn to Henry. Henry draws and plays a Cephalid Colosseum as his land for turn. He then passes to Shawn. Shawn draws, plays a Swamp, then passes. Ryan untaps and draws. He plays a Mountain and taps 2 mana for a Gamble. Gamble resolves and he searches his library for a card, puts it into his hand, then discards at random. He discards a Tybalt's Trickery. With nothing left, he passes. Chris untaps and in his upkeep takes 1 damage from the Mana Vault, then draws. He moves to combat and attacks Ryan with Elesh and Glow Rider. Ryan takes the hit. Chris moves to end step and Henry responds by cracking his Misty Rainforest and searches for an island. He then taps 2 mana to cast Brainstorm. He draws 3, then puts 2 back on top, and moves to his turn. He draws, then plays Urza's Saga. He taps Urza's Saga to cast a Jeweled Lotus of his own. He sacks Jeweled Lotus to cast his commander, Unctus, Grand Metatech. He then taps 2 mana to cast a Silver Mirror. He then passes to Shawn. Shawn draws and plays a Plains. He taps out for Azusa, Lost but Seeking. He then passes his turn to Ryan. At Shawn's end step, Ryan activates his top to look at the top 3 and puts them back in any order. Ryan moves to his turn, untaps and draws. He taps 3 mana to cast his commander, Slobad Iron Goblin. He activates his top to draw a card and puts top on the top of his library. He then plays a Bloodstained Mire. Then passes to Chris. Chris untaps and in his upkeep takes 1 from the Mana Vault, then draws. He taps 1 for a Mana Crypt. He taps 3 and casts Lauren of the Third Path. It resolves and triggers twice due to Elesh Norn. He targets Henry's Urza Saga and Silver Mirror, which then get destroyed. He moves to combat and attacks Ryan with Elesh Norn. Ryan takes the hit and Chris passes his turn. Henry untaps and draws. He pays 1 to equip Unctus with the Paradise Mantle. He then passes to Shawn. Shawn untaps and draws. He looks at his hand and decides to pass. Ryan untaps and draws for turn. He recasts Sensei's Divine Top and activates it. Not liking what he sees, he cracks his Bloodstained Mire, taking 1 and finds a mountain. He taps 1 mountain for a Goblin Welder. He passes to Chris. Chris untaps, and in his upkeep takes 1 from the Mana Vault. He then rolls for his Mana Crypt trigger and wins. Then he draws. He plays a Plains, then taps 3 mana for a Mage's Attendant. It resolves and it triggers twice, creating 2 wizards. He then moves to combat, swinging Elesh Norn at Ryan. Ryan blocks with Slobad. Chris moves to end step, and Henry responds by activating his Unctus, paying 2 life and targeting Unctus to become a blue artifact creature. He taps Unctus and Colosseum to cycle Vizier of the Tumbling Sands. He then moves to his turn. He draws, he plays an island as his land for turn, and pays 3 mana to cast a Foundry Inspector. He then passes to Shawn. Shawn draws and plays a Field of the Dead as his land for turn. He then passes to Ryan. Ryan untaps and draws. He pays 1 and activates his top. With nothing else, he passes. Chris untaps and in his upkeep takes 1 from the Mana Vault. He then rolls for Mana Crypt and wins. Then he draws. He immediately moves to combat and attacks Ryan with Elesh Norn and Shawn with Mage's Attendant. They both declare no blocks and take the damage. Chris then ends his turn. Henry untaps and draws. He casts a Lotus Petal and follows it up with a Grim Monolith. With nothing else, he passes. Shawn draws and taps out to cast his commander, Ixhel, Scion of Atraxa. He then plays Vesuva, having it enter as a copy of his Bayou. He then passes the turn to Ryan. Ryan untaps and draws. He taps 3 mana for a Magus of the Moon. With nothing else, he passes to Chris. Chris untaps, and at his upkeep takes 1 from the Mana Vault. He then rolls for Mana Crypt and wins, then draws. He taps 4 mana to cast Gideon of the Trials. He then zeroes Gideon, creating an emblem. He moves to combat and attacks Ryan with Elesh Norn. Ryan decides to block with the Magus of the Moon. Chris passes his turn. Henry untaps and draws. He casts Freed from the Real, targeting Unctus. He then demonstrates a loop with Unctus, Paradise Mantle, and Freed from the Real. With Paradise Mantle and Freed from the Real on a creature, you can infinitely tap and untap that creature. With Unctus, if that creature is blue, it'll trigger Unctus to loot through your deck. Unfortunately, with this combo, it does not work with Unctus, and Henry actually has the Paradise Mantle and the Freed from the Real on the Unctus instead of on the Foundry Inspector. For the sake of the game, we're going to assume it was on the Foundry Inspector. Henry then begins the loop. Once he hits Mox Opal in his graveyard, the table then decides, after some discussion, for Ryan to attempt to activate Goblin Welder, targeting the Paradise Mantle and another artifact, force Henry to commit in response by continuing the combo to limit his options of activating at will. Ryan targets the Paradise Mantle and the Silver Mirror to be swapped. After some pondering, Henry decides to go for it all and continues looting in response to the Goblin Welder. He gets to the very last card of his deck and notices Chris's Lauren can activate to have a player draw a card, so he decides to stop the loop. The Goblin Welder trigger then resolves with the Paradise Mantle and Silver Mirror swapping. Henry uses the last floating mana from the Paradise Mantle loop and casts a Chain of Vapor, targeting Gideon. In response, Chris sacks a wizard to attempt to counter the spell unless Henry pays 1. Henry pays for the 1, and Chris allows for Chain of Vapor to resolve, bouncing Gideon to his hand. After the dust settles, Henry, seeing no way out, decides to activate his Cephalid Colosseum on himself to draw himself out, and he loses the game. The turn is then moved to Shawn. Shawn untaps and draws a card. He moves to combat and attacks Chris with Ixhel. Chris declares no blocks and gets 2 poison counters. In his second main, he plays a Windswept Heath, cracking it and finding a Savannah. He pays 4 mana to cast a Static Orb. He passes to Ryan. Ryan untaps and draws. Having absolutely nothing, he passes. Chris untaps and at his upkeep takes 1 damage from the Mana Vault. He then rolls for Mana Crypt and loses, taking 3 damage. He then draws a card. He sends Elesh Norn at Shawn and everything else at Ryan. Shawn blocks Elesh Norn with Ixhel, and Ryan declares no blocks. In response to blocks, Chris channels Iganjo, Seat of the Empire, targeting Ixhel. Shawn responds by sacking his Field of the Dead to Sylvan Safekeeper, targeting Ixhel to give it Shroud. Iganjo then fizzles, and Chris passes the turn. Shawn untaps and draws. He moves to combat, attacking Chris with Ixhel. Chris takes it and gets 2 more poison counters. Shawn then moves to end step and triggers Ixhel, having Chris exile the top of his library for Shawn to play as long as it's exiled. Ryan untaps and draws. He pays 3 mana to cast a very, very sad Imperial Recruiter. He then passes his turn. Chris untaps and at his upkeep takes 1 from the Mana Vault. He then rolls for his Mana Crypt and loses, then draws. He attacks Ryan with Elesh Norn. Ryan blocks with the Recruiter. Chris then pays 4 mana to recast a Gideon of the Trials. He upticks Gideon, targeting Ixhel to prevent damage from it. He passes to Shawn. Shawn untaps and immediately casts a Seedborn Muse. He moves to end step and gets another card from Chris with Ixhel's ability. Ryan untaps and draws. He plays a Crystal Vein as his land for turn. He sacks Crystal Vein for 2 colorless mana and taps 2 mountains to cast Jessica's Will, choosing the ritual effect and targeting Shawn. It resolves and Ryan gets 6 red mana. He uses 3 of it to cast Underworld Breach. He exiles 3 cards from the graveyard and pays 2 mana to cast a Gamble from the graveyard. He finds a card, puts it in his hand, and discards randomly. He discards a Rite of Flame. Seeing no other options, he moves to end step and sacrifices Underworld Breach, passing to Chris. Chris untaps, and in his upkeep takes 1 from the Mana Vault. He then rolls for Mana Crypt and loses. Then he draws. He decides to 0 Gideon, making Gideon a 4/4 indestructible creature. He moves to combat and attacks Shawn with Gideon and Elesh Norn, and Ryan with Lauren. Shawn blocks the Elesh with Ixhel and takes 4, and Ryan takes the 2. Chris then passes his turn. Shawn draws and plays a Plains from Ixhel's exiled pile. He then taps for a green to cast Venerated Rot Priest. He then casts Ethersworn Canoness from Ixhel's exiled pile. He moves to combat and attacks Chris with Ixhel, and Chris takes it, getting 2 more poison counters. He moves to end step and gets another card from Chris's library exiled from Ixhel. Ryan untaps and draws. Completely out of gas right now, he passes to Chris. Chris untaps, and at his upkeep takes 1 from the Mana Vault. He then rolls for Mana Crypt and loses. Then he draws a card. He pays 4 mana to cast a Sarah Paragon. He plays Iganjo using Sarah Paragon's ability. He then moves to combat and attacks Ryan with Elesh Norn. Ryan takes the hit. Chris then passes to Shawn. Shawn untaps and drops a Smokestack. He goes to his end step and gets another card from Chris's library with Ixhel. Ryan also activates top at Shawn's end step, looking at the top 3 and putting them back in any order. Ryan moves to his turn, untapping, and draws a card. He plays an Inventor's Fair for turn. He then goes to end step, and in response, Chris activates Lauren, having Ryan and himself both to draw a card. He also taps 2 mana to cast Ephemerate, targeting Lauren. It resolves and Chris gets 2 ETB effects, targeting Shawn's Static Orb and Ethersworn Canoness. It resolves and the Static Orb and Canoness are both destroyed. Chris moves to his turn, untapping, and at his upkeep takes 1 from the mana vault. He then rolls for Mana Crypt and loses. He then rebounds Ephemerate, targeting his Mage's Attendant, getting 2 wizard tokens. Then Chris draws. Chris zeroes Gideon again, making Gideon a creature, then moves to combat. He attacks Shawn with Gideon and Ryan with Lauren. They both take the hit. On Chris's second main, he casts a Mox Amber. He then casts Ethersworn Canoness using Sarah Paragon's ability. With nothing else, he passes. Shawn untaps and moves to his upkeep. He stacks the Smokestack triggers to put the Soot counter on second. He taps 1 mana to cast Outseed of Life's Bounty. He moves to end step and gets another card from Chris's library with Ixhel. Ryan also activates his top at Shawn's end step, looking at the top 3 and putting them back in any order. Ryan decides to activate Goblin Welder at Shawn's end step, targeting Chris's Jeweled Lotus in his graveyard and Ethersworn Canoness on the battlefield. Still in Shawn's end step, Ryan attempts to abrade Chris's Glow Rider. Chris sacks 2 wizards to counter the abrade. Ryan then moves to his turn and untaps. In his upkeep, he sacks his Sensei's Divining Top to the Smokestack. He pays 4 mana to cast a Wheel of Misfortune. The players pick a number, then reveal. The end result being Chris taking 9 damage, and Chris wheels. Looking down Death's Door, Ryan passes to Chris. Chris untaps, and at his upkeep, sacks his Mana Vault to Smokestack. He then rolls for his Mana Crypt and wins, then draws a card. He sacks his Jeweled Lotus for 3 white mana and replays it using Sarah Paragon's ability. He then casts a Lotus Petal. He then sacks his Jeweled Lotus again for 3 white mana, exiling it and gaining 2 life due to Sarah Paragon's ability. He pays 4 mana for a Myrel, Shield of Argive. He zeroes a Gideon to make Gideon a creature, then moves to combat. He swings everything he can at Ryan. Ryan blocks the Glow Rider with his Goblin Welder, and in response to blocks, Chris activates Lauren to have him and Ryan both draw a card. Damage resolves, Glow Rider dies, as well as Ryan. In the second main, Chris pays 2 mana to cast a Chalice of the Void for 1. He then passes to Shawn. Shawn untaps, and Smokestack triggers. He sacks the Outseed of Life's Bounty to it and puts another Soot counter on Smokestack. He plays a Scrubland and taps out to play Shieldred, Whispering One. He moves to his end step, and Ixhel triggers for another card from Chris's library. Still in Shawn's end step, Chris flashes in Cathar Commando. Chris untaps, and in response to the Smokestack trigger, activates Cathar Commando, targeting Smokestack, destroying it. Chris also sacks a wizard token to Shieldred's ability. Chris then rolls for Mana Crypt and loses, then draws a card. Chris recasts the Cathar Commando from the graveyard using Sarah Paragon's ability. He zeroes Gideon to be a creature again and attacks Shawn with it and Elesh Norn. Shawn blocks Gideon with Azusa and Elesh Norn with Ixhel. On his second main, Chris casts an Archon of Emeria, then follows it up with a Trinisphere, and then passes to Shawn. On Shawn's upkeep, Shieldred triggers and he returns Azusa to the battlefield. He casts an Oracle of Moldiah and plays a tapped Verdant Catacombs out the top of his library with Oracle. He then moves to his end step and gets another card from Chris with Ixhel's ability. Chris untaps and at his upkeep sacks Mage's Attendant from the Shieldred trigger, gaining 2 life due to it being played from Sarah Paragon. He rolls for a Mana Crypt and loses, putting him below 0 but is still alive due to Gideon's emblem. He draws and plays a Plains. He upticks Gideon, targeting Ixhel, preventing it from doing damage, and follows it up with a Vern Wingmare from the graveyard using Sarah Paragon's ability. He moves to combat, attacking Shawn with Myrel and Sarah Paragon. Chris gets a trigger, creating soldiers equal to the number of soldiers he controls from Myrel. Shawn takes 6 damage and Chris passes turn. Shawn untaps and draws. He plays a swamp from the top of his library and cracks his Verdant Catacomb to find a forest. He pays 4 mana for an Arcane Signet. Shawn moves to end step, and Chris responds by flashing in an Archivist of Ogma. He also sacks his Cathar Commando, targeting Shawn's Arcane Signet, and it resolves. Shawn then gets another card from the top of Chris's library with Ixhel's ability. Chris untaps, and there was a Mist Shieldred trigger, but he rolls for Mana Crypt and loses. He then draws a card. He then plays Roadside Reliquary. He upticks Gideon, targeting Shieldred this time. He casts Savine's Reclamation, which resolves, targeting Alcide of Life's Bounty and Glow Rider. He moves to combat and attacks Shawn with Myrel, Sarah Paragon, Elesh Norn, and 2 soldiers. He gets an attack trigger, creating more soldiers from Myrel. Shawn blocks Myrel with Azusa and a soldier with Seaborn Muse. In response to blocks, Chris sacks his Roadside Reliquary to draw 2 cards. Shawn takes 4 damage. Chris passes the turn. On Shawn's upkeep, he returns Azusa again with Shieldred. He draws, then plays a swamp from the top of his library. He pays 9 mana for a White Sun's Twilight, where X equals 5. Chris responds by activating Lauren to have them both draw a card, hoping for an answer. He unfortunately does not find an answer, and Twilight resolves. Shawn gains 5 life, creates 5 Might creature tokens, and all other creatures are destroyed. He then passes to Chris. Chris untaps and rolls for Mana Crypt, which he loses. He draws and plays a Blind Obedience. He upticks Gideon, targeting a Might. He then plays Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, which he extorts, draining for 1. He then plays Grand Abolisher, which he also extorts, draining for 1. He then passes the turn to Shawn. Shawn untaps and draws. He plays an Ancient Tomb and follows it up with a Tooth and Nail Entwined. He searches for a Yawgmoth Thran Physician and a Blightsteel Colossus to hand. He uses the second effect to put Blightsteel and Tyrannix Rex from his hand onto the battlefield. They both enter tapped, and he passes the turn to Chris. Chris untaps and rolls for Mana Crypt, which he loses. He then taps 7 mana to recast Elesh Norn. He follows it up with a Recruiter of the Guard, which resolves, and he gets 2 ETB triggers. He searches for a Solitude and a Walking Ballista to his hand. He also remembers to extort Recruiter, draining Shawn for 1. He upticks Gideon, targeting a Might, and moves to combat, attacking Shawn with Thalia and Grand Abolisher. Shawn takes the damage, and in Chris's second main, he evokes Solitude, targeting Blightsteel Colossus. It resolves, and Shawn gains 11 life. Shawn untaps and draws a card. He pays 4 mana, taking 2 life from the Ancient Tomb to cast Yawgmoth, Thran Physician, which enters tapped. He then casts a Reanimate, targeting his Shieldred, also entering tapped. He moves to combat and attacks Gideon with Tyrannix Rex and 4 Mights. Chris blocks the Tyrannix Rex with Elesh Norn and 1 Might with Recruiter of the Guard. 1 damage from Rex and 3 Mights get through to Gideon for a total of 4 damage. Shawn activates Yawgmoth's ability, sacking a Might and targeting Thalia with a -1 counter, killing it, and drawing a card. Shawn then passes his turn. Chris untaps and rolls for Mana Crypt, which he wins. He sacks Grand Abolisher to Shieldred's ability, then draws a card. He upticks Gideon, paying 4 mana to target the Tyrannix Rex due to its Ward 4. He plays a Nykthos Shrine to Nyx as his land for turn. He pays 8 mana for a Walking Ballista. It enters the battlefield with 4 +1/+1 counters. He passes the turn to Shawn. Shawn untaps and returns Sylvan Safekeeper to the battlefield with Shieldred. He draws, then plays a Wasteland. He moves to combat and attacks Gideon with Yawgmoth, Shieldred, and 2 Mights. Chris blocks Shieldred with the Ballista, and in response to damage, removes 2 counters from Ballista to ping the Mights away. Damage resolves, and Gideon takes 2 damage. Shawn then pays 5 mana to cast from exile Thalia's Lancers. He searches for a Shalai Voice of Plenty and puts it into his hand. He then passes the turn to Chris. Chris untaps and draws. He sees the Phyrexian scriptures claiming his impending doom and concedes. Shawn wins the game. So this game was insane. Obviously, I was staxed out pretty much the entire game, having to play Value Breach and stuff like that. But Shawn coming out with the toxic win. Not toxic like the deck's toxic, but you know, being able to use Ixhel to get that card advantage. And I mean, he played maybe like 3 or 4 of Chris's cards. And you know, Chris just stacks everyone out, trying to get to that win, but Ixhel just took it over.
Yeah, Gideon couldn't hold for that much longer. He's trying to hold on to that cliff, but
yeah, yeah. The White Sun's Twilight was probably the real turning point of that game, because Chris had everything, and then Shawn dropped that, destroyed all the creatures. He made the mites, which funny enough, Chris was upticking to prevent them from killing Gideon, but it's all right.
Yeah, I mean, when you go 3 or 4 turns in negative life, I mean, eventually you're gonna give in if you can't get to your win con. So
yeah,
Ixhel proving that it can do well in the longer game because it just exiles off the top of your opponent's library. You can cast them anytime, and it's not attached to Ixhel. So yeah, pretty decent Abzan commander.
Yeah,
could be a good Stax commander.
Yeah, and Shawn's deck had a bunch of like big beefy creatures, and when you land those, Shieldred was doing work that game. So but yeah,
I mean, it wasn't really doing that much work though.
I mean,
I was sacrificing my 1/1 artifact tokens for
yeah, but like he was also being able to block, recur some of his creatures.
Yeah,
and if you don't deal with it, it's just gonna just keep on doing its thing. It's also a 6/6. So
well, he dealt with it himself when he White Sun's Twilight.
Yeah, I mean that card. I
feel like that was definitely the part that
he paid 9 mana for that.
Yeah,
because of the I think it was Glow Rider and the Vern Wingman.
Yeah.
But anyways, congrats to Shawn on his win. Still undefeated. With Ixhel. If you happen to enjoy this content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe. Join the Discord if you wanna hang out with us in there.
We also play spell table games.
Yeah. Just let us know. We'll definitely be in there, and we'll see y'all later.